Welcome to From the Ashes, the Dungeon Crawler Network podcast all about Ashes of Creation by Intrepid Studios. Bear witness to the rebirth of the MMORPG genre from the ashes of an industry that has left the gamers behind. I am your host and founder of the Dungeon Crawler Network, Aggelos, and I am joined by my co-GM over at Hands of Fate, our Ashes of Creation chapter for our community, Stormzlord. How are you, man?
Doing awesome tonight. Doing awesome.
Excellent. Glad to have you back. Also, we have one of our guild members as well from Hands of Fate, Alpha Soul. How are you, man?
Doing great. Great to be back.
I'm still a little disappointed in you. We had a perfect opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
I really wanted to reenact a scene from American Psycho, but he couldn't find an axe. So that was a missed opportunity, and I'm very disappointed. But we also have a special guest tonight. You may have recognized him from the Ashen Forge and her awesome interview with Stephen Sharif last week on, I guess, it was episode 15, correct, Dygz?
That's right. That's right.
There we go. If you haven't checked that out yet, I really do encourage you to do that. Head on over. You can search them on YouTube, the Ashen Forge, or Theory Forge. It's Theory Forge on YouTube or the Ashen Forge on iTunes. Check those out. They're a really cool group over there. Definitely check out their show. I listen to them every time they release a new episode. So there you go. Stamp of approval. All right, we have a fun show for you tonight. We've got, if you notice the title, The Great Addon Debate. This is something I kind of wanted to talk about because if I remember correctly, on your interview, you actually talked about add-ons very briefly, and Steven mentioned how he really did not want to have add-ons in the game. Well, that got my mind thinking, and my question is that a good idea? All right. So, guys, right off the bat, I know add-ons are something that I personally feel in the MMO space is a necessity right off the bat. One of the games that we cover, the Elder Scrolls Online, we have a show for that too, Tales of Tamriel, if you haven't heard of it. All the way back, like 5 years ago, we talked about the Great Add-on War, as I called it, because during Alpha and Beta, they had a really, really robust API for add-ons, and they did a lot of work. Modders were doing all sorts of stuff to make up for the shortcomings of the UI itself, and right before the game went live, ZeniMax just shut off that API. Like, they stripped it down to pretty much nothing, and it caused a lot of stir in the community, because if you've played that game without add-ons, you feel the shortcomings. I know both Alpha Soul and Storms, they're both in our ESO guild and know some of the pains of guild stores without add-ons is enough to make you pull what hair you have left. I see, apparently I tried without add-ons for a while and now I have none. It's a mess. So I'm a little disheartened by that theory of, hey, let's not do add-ons. Let's get everyone's first impression. Stormzlord, what about you? What are your thoughts?
So it comes from two places. One, add-ons are extremely helpful, especially when games they've tried to accommodate all things they could do, but they just haven't thought everything through, or they don't have time. One of the two. So when they have a good API for that, that's fantastic. But with most APIs, they went the wrong direction. They opened everything up and then selectively shut things down. So then you had position like Myriads where you could go in and you could see PvP stuff you weren't supposed to see. Right? And that's a bad add-on. But they said they would allow it because it's an add-on. They had left it out there. This patch, they're going to shut it down. But again, when you open things up and then shut it down, you open yourself up to problems.
Mm-hmm. Alpha Soul, thoughts?
So I probably land right down on the middle of it. I think in the perfect world, or not, I won't say perfect world, but I think if your game is good enough, then you don't need add-ons. Like, you should have the functionality built in. But the power of the entire community versus, you know, a dev team is just kind of astronomical. So I think for me, it depends on what it is.
Dygz.
This is a perfect storm, actually, because I never use add-ons. I like to play games as they come. I haven't felt the need for add-ons. And so, but there's a great thread on that in the forums that has been going for about the last 2 weeks. And I think in the OP was saying that they don't like add-ons or mods because once they're introduced, everybody feels like they have to have them or they're left behind. So it kind of forces people to grab them once they're introduced. But my question would be for you guys, what do you think are the types of essential add-ons that you like? And the follow-up question would be, what if, as Steven I think is hoping for, the UI is already so customizable that you don't feel a need for add-ons, or if the devs are willing to support you by adding requested add-ons themselves.
You know, that is interesting. I will say this, though. I've heard a lot of developers throw that out there. And Steven knows I love him, so we'll go from there. But those buzzwords we've heard before. Oh, our UI is so customizable. Why would you need any external? We have yet to see that actually happen. The thing that add-ons in my mind, it's hard for me to say right now exactly what it is. I mean, I can't, but if I were allowed to talk about Alpha Zero, which would be a horrible example because it is Alpha Zero and so much of it's not there, I could give some theories there. One of the things that is so nice about add-ons is sometimes the community sees a deficiency that doesn't quite hit what the developers see right off the bat. We've already seen this in games like, let's bring World of Warcraft in here. They've actually added add-ons that were in there from vanilla and BC when they went, wow, and they could tell what people were using. And when they go, wow, 70% of our entire user base is using this add-on, clearly this is something we need to add into our game. I think that is incredibly useful because you start seeing the trends of what the community is really looking for, right? So, I mean, let's go ahead and add, from the ESO example, the guild stores. If you saw them originally... Oh, yeah, like everyone kind of shudders a little bit at that. Because when you first look at a guild store, and the reason why I'm thinking this may be applicable to Ashes is because they're going to do a similar system. I don't know about the bid system blind, but they did say about stalls. You would be renting stalls to sell, right? It's the same concept in ESO. They just use a blind bidding system to determine who's actually, and here's my cat, for those who want to see her, for how you acquire them. Outside of how you acquire them, one of the issues that ESO had is when you first looked at a guild store, it had a search button. You could search by name, which only worked if you knew the exact name, by the way. It didn't do it didn't do wild cards or anything of that nature. If you put in Greatsword and you were looking for Greatsword of Might, nothing would come up because if it wasn't named explicitly Greatsword, it wasn't coming up. And you couldn't do Greatsword asterisk to get everything. It just didn't happen. But it also, when you did that, it would pull up just a plethora of items. Like if you just did a blank search, every random item was just pulled up. So you'd have weapons intermixed with crafting materials, intermixed with food and potions. There were no filters to help you find what you were looking for. You had to go page by page to find an item. It's like page 1, sword, 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 potion, potion. And you're looking for like a motif book. Nope. Page 2. Nope. Page 3. Nope. Page 4. Motif book. Not the one I'm looking for. Page 5. You know, one page at a time in order to find it. There are now several add-ons called like Awesome Guild Store and Tamriel Trade Center, a whole bunch of ones that will now allow you. It still uses the base system, but what it does, instead of doing a raw display, you can filter it out, go, I only want to see motif books. So when the page opens, if there's no motifs on that page, it goes nothing to display, and just hit next. Oh, and it's only showing you the books. Yes, the system is flawed, but when you can literally not use a guild store because unless you have an add-on, that is a problem. It's still bad to this day. They've never actually made it better because they just go, people are using the add-ons. It's fine, which is, I think, a deficiency on the developer part, but...
Well, see, I don't.
Okay.
From a developer perspective, right, there's a certain amount of developers you have with a certain amount of time to do each day, with a certain amount of priorities that are changing based on whoever's in charge. And fixing things like the guild store are going to be really low down, which is why if you open up for an add-on, that's where you allow, you can get tremendous feedback to the developers. They should work on something, or, you know what, we would love to work on that, but it's just not the priority we can get.
Right. And I mean, it also makes sense of why work on it if we don't have the free time when there's a quote-unquote workaround that people are already using, right? So it makes sense. Okay, I get that from a development point of view.
But even in the case, like Dygz just brought up, he doesn't use add-ons, right? So what happens when you have somebody who just doesn't use add-ons, or maybe they're not as technical acumen or familiar with it, and they come across this? How many people would they potentially be losing to these defunct systems who don't pick up add-ons to, make up for the slack?
Right. To be 100%, one of the things I really wish that we had on the show, just even as a temporary, is somebody who plays ESO on the consoles where there's no add-ons and how they do guild stores. I still don't know to this day. And I know quite a few people who don't use add-ons who just have no idea. Like, they're like, I've never shopped at a guild store, like, ever, because I can never find anything. And it makes sense. So,
But again, so one thing I have to say to what you said earlier, your response to your rebuttal to me, is that I agree. Every game I've followed since Vanilla EverQuest has said that they were going to be releasing content over time and you would be able to EverQuest, and I've been waiting for an MMORPG since about year 2000 where you could literally EverQuest. They promise. No, I mean new quests,
I know.
Not
that was a jab.
But I get you. So it's true, right? They promise the moon, they can't always deliver. But it seems to me that what Steven is hoping for is that we'll be getting the feedback from the players. They want a very customizable user interface right off the bat, and then it sounds like they would prefer to be able to support us with the deficiencies that we see and introduce that layer. So I hope that's what happens. Right. But yeah, we don't know.
And this is actually a good kind of segue into the idea of like human mentality and how they work. We are in a very opinionated show. Obviously, that's what we're here for. We're talking about our opinions and what we like to see. I know one of our last episodes, people were telling me that my opinion on like designs are too crazy, which is fine. That's your opinion, and in my opinion, that's what we do. But I think part of the problem with the no add-ons versus allowing add-ons is that the people who are playing the game and the people who are actually going to be giving the feedback is normally different. There's a very vocal minority, right? And I'm sure there's quite a few people who listen to our show that goes, I really don't want that Aggelos character to be given the only feedback that's listened to. Because if that were the case, I'd have all elves dead. So
there would be no elves.
There would be no elves.
Yeah.
No, there would be elves. We need target practice. But there would, there's a lot of vocal minorities. You see this on the forums a lot, right? The few people who are going to say what they think they need, okay? But I'm going to really be frank, and I'm going to say something very unpopular. Gamers are stupid. They have no idea what they need. They have an idea of what they want, but when they get it, it's most often not what they want, and therefore it's a problem. This goes back. Let's talk. Well, even I won't use EverQuest. I didn't play EverQuest, but I'll do early World of Warcraft. Raids are too hard. They're too hard. We need easier options. So what did they do? They started adding in multiple different types of difficulties. And then where we are now, WoW's not where it was before. It's too easy. I get bored because I do Dungeon Finder. I see the story, and now I have no reason to do anything else. And why would I do any of the harder modes? People think they know what they want, but in reality, a lot of times, what they think they want, and then when it's given to them, they go, "Oh, this really isn't what I really wanted." One of the best ways to find out what players want, and I know I'm bringing it finally back around, is like I was saying with World of Warcraft. They looked at what add-ons were being used. And when they finally saw that enough people... data doesn't lie. These analytics don't lie. If you're looking at it and going, wow, 90% of our player base is using the ESO Awesome Guild Store. Clearly there's a problem. They're speaking out by changing what they don't like versus one or two angry people on a podcast or in the forums spouting what they think they know. I think that's analytical data you can't ignore, and they're ignoring it at this point by not allowing it to happen in the first place.
Well, so let me add one thing onto that. So I think I get what Steven is saying when he is going against it. I think the example he used specifically was DPS meters, right? Now, DPS meters, at least how they were in UO, came up, obviously, because you would come across, I mean, obviously, there are points where people want to know how much damage they're doing, but there are specific bosses and mechanics within the game that require you to do a certain amount of damage, and without knowing who's doing how much damage, you can't really pinpoint who's doing what, and
yeah.
So there's an actual need for that within the game is what I'm trying to say. He used that as an example, but then I would kind of push further on that and basically say, okay, if that's the example and the main goal is not to be, what's the term?
Elitist?
I think it was separating. Not elitist. It's like separating, or he doesn't
segregating.
want segregating, kind of like that basically. So he doesn't want things in there that divide, but rather bring people together, which makes complete sense. But if you don't have a DPS meter and you say, okay, there are no DPS meters, there's no way that you can do that, and you expand that to add-ons. My question would be, are there any mechanics that will absolutely require things like that? Will there be any mechanics that dictate you to need add-ons in any way, shape, or form? And it seems like the answer they're going with is no, but I guess your earlier point, I find that hard to believe,
right.
Basically.
If the content... Oh, go ahead.
To bring it in a circle again. Sorry to cut you off.
No, go.
So when ESO first came out, I did play on the Xbox, right?
I'm sorry.
And that's I was too. Started to shine like, what the heck's this? Anyways, you don't have a DPS meter on an Xbox. You don't have that ability to do that. So what they did is you found things in the game that could tell you who was doing a larger or smaller amount of DPS based on a time. There's a particular world boss before they buffed him up in, I think it was Deshaun, where you had some guys around that would help with the ads, but then the one guy would focus on the boss, and they would time that person. How much time did it take him to take that boss from full health to 0 with no ads coming in to interfere, and then they're calculating out with all these spreadsheets what the DPS was.
There was also an NPC in Rivenspire, I think, that was bugged and would not die but you could attack him over and over again. He was a wood elf, which I was fine with because he's a wood elf. But he was a wood elf that was sitting against a bench that you could attack, and he would never die because the way he was sitting, he was kind of he bugged into the geometry, so it prevented him from actually landing that killing blow. You get him all the way down to 1, he would get up to like fall, and then would glitch into the geometry and reset. So you could constantly keep it running, right? And they did something similar to that. So people will find it. And I will say, if there's not a need for DPS meters, your boss encounters either 1 are too simple, or 2 have no enrage timers, which could happen.
Yeah.
But I know this is the big problem, and I shouldn't even say a problem. This is often the argument people go to, and I'm glad Dygz is on here because you're saying you're mostly a role player and a I don't want to say a casual at that point because you probably play more than I do.
I'm a casual challenge person and a hardcore time person.
There you go.
So I like casual challenge, but so in WoW, I think I would spend 2 hours swimming around continents so I can completely do my fog of war and because I'm an explorer first. Yep. That's the most important thing. Yeah, I'll swim for 2 hours happily.
There you go.
And
I know the more casual base, they fear that elitism, that idea of you can't come with me, you don't do enough damage. Okay? Mm-hmm. That is often, most people don't, if they were somehow able to block DPS meters, which I'm going to tell you right now they can't, and I will tell you how they can't in a second. But if they were able to block DPS meters and people could only make add-ons for UI elements or, I don't know, whatever they want to do it, I don't know, making your cooking prettier, whatever, most people wouldn't complain. Most people who argue about not having add-ons are only because they're fearful of the DPS meters, or some people are fearful of the deadly boss mod kind of thing where it tells you everything you have to do, which those are 2 extremes. The DBM can be stopped by not allowing it, but the DPS meter cannot be stopped. And I will tell you why. But as long as you have access to a combat log, which you will, there are programs out there that will read your screen using OCR and will give you a DPS output. Final Fantasy XIV is a game that does not have any add-ons. Guess what? There's a program called ACT that is a DPS meter. All you have to do is put your combat log as the main text window and let it run. It reads that log and gives you a DPS rating. And that's not in-game. That's outside.
It's always funny to me when hardcore people try to paint the issue of avoiding hardcore mentality as a fear, because it's not even a fear of the elitism. It's just, I don't think there should be, DPS shouldn't really be the thing. When I used to play D&D, we weren't doing DPS.
No, yeah.
Seconds didn't matter.
DPH.
So it's not really about DPS. That's the issue. And when I'm playing, I don't want to have to really think about DPS. I just want to be effective, and are you effective? Or I don't even care how optimal people are. I just want to be able to find a way to defeat the boss.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be the best way. Actually, I prefer flair over function. So if you can do it in a dramatic way or a cool way, that's kind of more important to me. And somebody mentioned DPS the other day in that add-on thread on the forums. And I was saying what I hope will happen, and we heard a little bit about this, I think, in the last live stream with the devs, is that the augments in our abilities are supposed to allow us to stack effects in such a way that if your group wants to focus on stacking shadow effects or ice effects or whatever, we're supposed to be able to help each other know each other's abilities, what each person likes to use, and then take advantage of that to maximize the strengths and maximize the weaknesses of our opponents without hopefully necessarily having to depend on DPS. So it won't be so much about, oh, we've got to maximize just the raw damage. It'll be, hey, our tank loves to use ice attacks in order to tank or do his walls. And if he puts that wall down with a ice effect on it that's going to slow anybody who rams into the wall, I'm also going to take an augment that uses ice and stack his wall with that. So we're building in that way without having to focus on the DPS meters to give us that information. So hopefully we can get the same we can maximize our group abilities without necessarily focusing just on the raw math of it.
Right. And that definitely came about like pretty much everyone here, and I love that we have the cast. The gentlemen here on this show, we're all middle-aged or older. So we've been around since pretty much the beginning of MMOs. I know my first MMO was Ultima Online, which technically wasn't even one of the first ones. I think it was like Meridian 59 was what was considered, I think, the first graphical MMO. Anyway, we're used to the idea that it wasn't always just tank, healer, DPS. That actually started to evolve around 2010-ish. I'm thinking it was around 2010 because it was World of Warcraft was at its height. Wrath of the Lich King came in. That's when they started simplifying all of their stuff into the tank, healer, DPS. And I know a lot of people don't like that I use World of Warcraft as a reference, but you cannot deny it as being a mover and shaker in our industry. And everything started following suit because by around that time, it was taunting like 15 million subs. It was the epitome of MMOs. It was pop culture. Everyone knew it. It was a mover and shaker. So they started changing stuff. Early World of Warcraft, BC, there was CC. There were debuffers. All the older MMOs, there were entire classes that did nothing but debuff. Like, they didn't really have damage. I remember Dark Age of...
Enchanter.
The Enchanter, yeah. From EverQuest. I was thinking even the Enchanter from DOAC that did that. Whatever the Shroomer was in the Hibernian side. I can't remember him right now.
Oh, yeah. I
He was
that class.
nothing but a debuffer. Like, his shrooms would put debuffs to make everything easier. That all changed when they started going, it's not fun. I know podcast listeners can't see my air quotes, but the air quotes, it's not fun just to be a support person, which I don't know who ever thought that was a thing. But that's when they started going, well, what if we just start combining support abilities in with our damage dealers so that way it's kind of a mix? And that's where we start losing it, because then eventually it became, don't take that support ability, go with the raw damage instead. We just get it done faster.
Well, especially if the leaders of your group are looking at these meters and saying, you didn't do enough damage, or you didn't do enough heals. In the EverQuest Next design, one of the abilities that they were saying was going to be in the design was unsummon. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's what I want to be. I want to be the master unsummoner and just be the person that you bring into a group where there's a summoner and all I do is just unsummon everything that they summon. That's who I want my character to be. And I don't care about damage. I don't care about heals. I just want to unsummon the hell out of everything that people summon, and that's my role in the world.
The thing is, they need to start making fights that require stuff like that. I specifically remember, and I'll let you continue here in a second, but I specifically remember Recount. The add-on would actually track not just DPS, but it tracked other things. Because there were certain fights I specifically remember in BC, and then when they started trying to revitalize hard content in Cataclysm, I remember being in a raid fight, and it was... What was it? It was Deathwing's son in Blackwing Ascent.
Naltharion?
Yeah, Naltharion. When you went in and then he went up in the air and he filled the room with lava, so everyone is on separate platforms. and there was a guy who was casting, and you had to interrupt. So they had to put like 3 people on a platform because they would cast this thing every 6 seconds, and your interrupt was 8, so you had to rotate around. And there were people who were checking that on the DPS meter, going, "Jealous, you only hit 6 interrupts. You should have hit 8. What in the world is going on here?"
I remember that.
They need to start developing encounters that require you to debuff, to support, to crowd control. And then it's not just raw numbers. You can track other things like, oh, they track dispels. Like they used to do that on Recount for healers. Oh, everyone had a plague. Hey, healer 3, you had 1 dispel and our other healer had 15. Take your hand out from under your butt and do some work, like that's going to happen.
Nefarian was his name.
Nefarian, yes. Yeah. That was a fun fight. I loved it so much.
You're right. The mechanics have to change in order to drive the other abilities forward. One of the things that the new, well, not new anymore, but the ESO newer dungeons, is the mechanics started to change away from DPS. There are some encounters that if you hit too much DPS, you're going to, cause issues as well. This is what we need to work more towards with these other ones.
Yep. I remember, do you guys ever remember the whole stop DPS thing? That in a modern game, that doesn't happen anymore. But I remember certain fights where if you weren't ready to push phase, they were like, all DPS stop, sit on your hands.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the whole, what is that video? More
dots?
More deeps.
More dots?
Yeah, more dots. All right, stop.
Yeah, and so one of the maybe dreams or wishes that I have, visions that I have for Ashes of Creation is for the summoner. And I forget what it's called now, but for the summoner, what would it be? It would be a rogue summoner. A rogue summoner, I think, is if they become, if they're able. Wait, it's summoner rogue, I think, because it has to be that it's a summoner, but the rogue changes it into Shadow Man.
Shadow Dancer, yeah.
So if that summoner summons a shadow cloud, and that shadow cloud enhances the damage of the necromancer's skeletons. So you are adding to DPS in that sense, but it's indirect. So you might not be getting credit for it, but you're still adding a very important role to the group that's not necessarily going to be couched by the DPS meter. But those are the kinds of things that I'm hoping we'll just naturally do. We will work together to enhance the strengths of our group and say, because that's the way I played, and this is going to sound stupid, I'm a Care Bear, so who cares? When I played Wizard 101, I was trained how to fight in that game by an elite PvP arena PvP group. And that's what they trained me to do, is I know this person is going to play these 5 abilities, so I'm going to enhance their abilities. I know this mob is going to play that, so I'm going to weaken those abilities. And that's what we're focused on, which is more fun to me than just looking at the raw numbers. How does my group like to play, and how can I enhance their play, and how can they enhance my play with the abilities that we have?
And a lot of top tier people in Gears, especially PvE raiders and stuff, aren't really in. This is actually a problem with the modern MMO and the modern Western gamer. It's something that I heard, and it's a weird concept between Eastern MMOs and Western MMOs, where Eastern MMOs tend to look at more of a group type setting versus the Westernized MMOs, and Westernized everything in general. They tend to idolize the rogue character, not the rogue as in the stabby, but the one-man army. I can stand the Punisher guys. Whereas the top tier groups aren't looking at individual DPS unless there's a problem and they go, who's having the issue? Otherwise, it's raid DPS. Like that. If you look at World of Logs and things like that, you can have an individual, but most guild leaders look at the entire fight and they don't care. They're just watching the entire average raid DPS because that's what matters. There's certain fights where they don't even talk about people hitting individual caps. They're like, the raid has to hit above a certain number. And my stupid computer threw a sound at me. Thank you, Microsoft. So,
well, I guess the other thing for me is because I'm a hardcore time person, I don't care about speed. So that's my question there. Why would the DPS of the entire raid matter? Why does that matter?
In older games, I shouldn't say older games, modern games that have DPS thresholds, like having to push within a certain amount of time, or if there is what's called the enraged timer, where if by a certain time the boss doesn't die, it essentially goes God mode and kills everybody. There's certain thresholds you have to hit. Like there were certain bosses that they added that literally, I was thinking one that had the shortest enraged timer was in BC. It was 6 minutes to kill it. If you did not kill it in 6 minutes, it literally got a buff that was undispellable that gave it like 3,000% damage, haste. It was, if it hit that point, you were over.
Or there are some
trials.
So was there no strategy that could beat that?
It was raw damage. It was what they called a DPS check. If you could beat him, that meant your group had enough gear that you could probably go through the rest of the raid. They call them DPS checks. If you could not beat that timer, your gear level was probably not high enough, and therefore you would have to go back and farm gear to go in. One thing that I think add-ons are very helpful for, remember ESO, they're big on support buffs, and you're buffing yourself, you're debuffing the enemy. That stuff originally was not in the game. Like, whenever you hit a buff, it's like, okay, it lasts for 6 seconds. There was no icon or anything to tell you that the buff was there. So you were tracking it in your head if you could do that. But some characters had multiple buffs to keep up, you know, and they stopped at different times. I specifically remember that if I biting jabs, I had major brutality for 6 seconds, but I had 8 seconds on my Fighters Guild trap, but my caltrops lasted 15 seconds, you know, so you eventually would lose track of those things. So to optimize that, people figured out how to put those things in game, and that's my big reason for having add-ons, so that we can help see the data that we need to see.
One thing that reminds me of that's actually making me laugh is I saw, I don't know what I was waiting for. Was it for EverQuest? I think it was last year or just the year before, but I saw there was a YouTuber who was saying, we need to have games that have no health meters so that you can't, and I'm like, they're there because we can't, you know, we don't have enough information. Yeah, we don't have enough information to give us, you know, we have 5 senses that we can use in real life. And they're much more fine-tuned than anything that we have on screen. So that's why we need health meters, because it's easy for us to see, and humans are very visual. So would those be those debuff counters? Would they be like some form of meter, or what would the visual effect be that you're monitoring?
In this one, it was an icon with a countdown timer on it.
It depends.
And yeah, it could.
There are some that do both. Or some are the ones I like that are better, or I used to like better, where the whole bar, you could see it going down, going smaller.
That's a visual display.
But I prefer, because there's so many of them now, I prefer the countdown timer.
Yeah.
That's just a personal choice.
And you also know what it is, too, based on the icon. If it's a dripping red a teardrop, oh, it's a bleed effect, you know, or a shield that's broken. Oh, they rent my armor. You know, like, you can get those ideas. And ESO, like I said, at the start, didn't show you that. It just was like, hey, you did it, and there you go.
Alpha had a really good question way back in the beginning, though, right? What about those who aren't astute enough in technology or programming or whatever to do an add-on, right? And that leans towards where I think a guild can help. Eventually you'll find a guild to get with, and hopefully the right guild will help you to use the right add-ons that you need and how to put them together.
Join Sands of Fate will help you. No, but that's,
I didn't say that.
I did. That's fine. No, it was. I agree. There are some people who don't get it, and that's fine. But I will say there's enough tech-savvy people here. I know both Storms and myself, we both work in IT. I'm not really sure. Alpha Soul, I think he's pretty adept as well. Dygz,
Product manager.
yeah, product man. We both work IT. We understand that whole side of things. I'm not a very good programmer, so we're going to just whatever. But people know, and the type of jobs that we have, we know that we have to quote-unquote dumb it down or make it user-friendly. And there are sites that will then start popping up. Look at what happened with ESO. Remember when it first came out, how long it took to actually do an add-on? It wasn't really that big of a pain. You had to download all the config files. You had to go into your documents area, find where the add-ons were stored, extract it into there, and then boot it up and do a reload UI. Well, that doesn't sound real difficult for some people. Some people are like, I have to do what now? So a site called ESO UI came out and said, here, we designed an entire application that you install. It has a search feature. You find the add-on you want, click install. We'll do all the work for you. Click activate. You're done. And we'll even update it for you. You know, you hit the button update, and people will do this for you. So I really don't.
But I think
Okay.
that sounds to me like when PvP people say to PvE people, oh, we'll fight for you. And it's like, no, I don't want to be involved in PvP. That does not include getting you to PvP for me. I don't want to be involved at all. And so I don't think the issue is people don't know how to do it or won't know how to do it. The people who don't know how to do it probably aren't interested in doing it. And even for me, I would be thinking about, again, is this, what is it going to look like on my screen? Is it just going to be, because I am fashion over function as well, so it has to look nice. I don't want a bunch of just numeric bars on there. It needs to fit the style of the UI. It has to look like it fits with the game. Although, you know, again, do I really want to pay attention to all that stuff? I don't like when I see people that have their screen covered with bars and stuff, like I don't want to see all that stuff on my screen. So some of it is just play style in any case, and I don't think you'll be able to change people's play style who just aren't into add-ons. But again, I think even after all I've heard, my hope would be that even if maybe add-ons were available in the beginning, my hope would be that the devs would take that and turn it into something that they feel fits with the game. But hopefully the UI will be customizable enough. So wait, EQ2, since we have mostly Daybreak people, do we have any idea? We have mostly Daybreak devs. Do we have any idea about how customizable EQ2 UI became over time? I stopped playing EQ2 a long time ago, even before I stopped playing WoW.
I never even picked it up. I went the Mythic route because back in that day, you know, you had your Ultima Online, and then we started seeing the progenitors of, you had Sony Online Entertainment, which did a whole bunch of MMOs, the EverQuest. But then you had Mythic, EA Mythic, as they became the next big one, who did other games like Dark Age of Camelot and Warhammer and things like that. Those were the breaks. I went the other side. I never even played EverQuest. Because
what I would think, though, and that's a very valid point, is, again, from another perspective, is the add-ons to me are total choice, right? If you want them, great. If you don't, that's great. But when you look at those who came out of EverQuest, if you want to look at if or not the add-ons were eventually added into the game, I wouldn't look at the developer at that point. I would look at who was driving the requirements. Whether that would, because that's the person who can decide whether or not they're going to work on it. The developer themselves, yeah, they get told what to do. So I would ask at Intrepid now, who is the one who sits there and decides, you know what, we've got this much of a backlog to do. We can select so many story points to work on. This is what's going to happen over something else.
Steven.
So the real question is, who's the product manager?
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, there you go, Mr. Agile. That's what. That's the answer.
Yeah. No, it definitely makes sense. I think at this point, I guess the real final thing before we start moving on to the next segment, because we've been on this for a while, my big
Have we killed it yet?
what? You have something to say?
Have we killed it yet?
Have we killed it yet? What? No.
Yeah. No. Go ahead.
Well, I have
Okay.
another question. So, so is it? So what are? So I've heard the guild store, right?
Mhm.
And I've heard DPS meters and DPM. What else?
I mean, there
There are so many.
are so many. Yeah. There's like you name it. There were things that I actually just installed probably maybe 3 weeks ago that I didn't know existed, that I thought, how did I actually play ESO without this thing? For example, like there's this automated writ thing. There's like these writ quests that you kind of do every single day. You
Save
have to
your
look
figures.
up. Yeah, exactly. You save your figures, but there's an add-on that actually enables you to, if you have the materials, it automatically crafts it for you. So you just go and hand it in, right? A lot of like little quality of life things that they're just
Well,
add-ons for almost
special.
everything.
You know, and the funny thing is,
Yeah.
now that you said that, and I'm sitting here thinking about it, a lot of times in terms of services, and ZeniMax was fine with this one, but a lot of times in the term of services, any add-on that will automate things for you is actually considered an exploit and banned. I'm actually sitting there going, how is
Yeah.
that Writ Writer wasn't banned yet? But they don't care.
Yeah,
They,
technically
they
it's a
asked,
macro,
they
right?
asked
It's-
ESO that.
it
They
is a
asked Gina,
macro. It really is,
And they
because
said, we're not going to ban it. Yeah.
it wasn't something that automated gameplay that was considered difficult. It's like, it's the same quest every day. Make me 3 great swords. So what it does is it goes, okay, to make the great swords, it requires 15 ingots. You have it, hit craft, and your character just does it. But yeah, I'm sitting there going, that kind of did automate. And that is where some add-ons tend to get into a problem that I even admit is a problem, is when they start automating things. So
I'm old, so what Alpha reminded me of, and I guess I am often old school. So back in the day, when I first got my first job, and I'm working with computers, and it's DOS, and using WordPerfect, and everything is keyboard, and we started moving towards Windows, and I was like, hey, let's use the mouse. And I was like, mouse? Why am I going to take one hand off a keyboard? I can do everything I need to do with both hands on my keyboard. Why do I
I
need
knew
a
people like
mouse?
that.
And then, like 4 years later, I'm like, this mouse has no mouse wheel?
yeah.
How do you expect me to work without a mouse wheel? Come on, let's. So that's probably the fun thing about add-ons. Even though I'm like, yeah, who needs add-ons? I bet if they got snuck in there, or even if somehow I didn't know that players were making them, but the devs finally introduced them, and I'd probably be like, oh, that's so cool. Why didn't they do this before?
So,
right.
As a
So
fun experiment, I almost just want to load up a bunch of add-ons on ESO, get Dygz to play, get them used to it, and then take them all away.
right.
Everything away.
Right.
He's like, I could just see him. My game's broken, dude. Nothing's working
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you expect me to play my character like this?
Yeah, no.
Yep.
It is true, but you know, I definitely say in closing for this segment that while there are some negatives to add-ons, there are certain add-ons that, you know, that automate things that are cheats, you know, and you have to be very vigilant of those types of things. But one of the best benefits of add-ons is the idea of crowdsourcing. You are crowdsourcing from an entire game populace, because Intrepid Studios, I forget how many people they have right now, but what is it, 70 I think they said total? Overall, like even contractors and stuff. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. You have 70 people there. If you have 100,000 people playing the game, you know, you have that mindset of this crowdsourcing, this brainstorming of ideas to make the game better. And that's what happened in World of Warcraft. They watched what players were using. They could tell what APIs were making calls, and they went, wow, everyone's hitting this one API. You know, we're seeing 90% of our player base hitting this API. So clearly, this is something we should probably just put in the game, you know, and that improve the game overall.
Part of what I hear you saying is it's kind of like bug testing, right? We can do this so much internally, but we need to make it external, and people will find our bugs and our problems very quickly. And if you have people who can, do the programming for you, yeah, why not outsource that if you don't have time to do that? And that kind of solves, in some ways, what Stormzlord is saying about time on the schedule and man hours within the company itself. But we just have to see where they want to go and what they have to provide for us, and then that'll be interesting.
It would be really interesting if, and this is just something I thought about, if the UI was so customizable that it was almost like a super user-friendly add-on creator. You know what I mean? All I'm thinking in my head is, once upon a time, when you build a website, you were editing everything through HTML. Like the early websites, that's what you're doing. Over time, I mean, obviously you can tell a lot of difference. Things started coming in, WordPress, Wix, stuff like that. They're like, most people don't know how to do the CSS, the JavaScript, the HTML. So we're just going to build this template builder and make people drag and drop what they want. I don't know if that is a possibility one way or the other, but it would be really neat if what they provide is essentially an everyman add-on creator. You want to make something? Here's every drop-down list we have of every command that's available in plain speech rather than API code, and you drag and drop and build what you're after.
That would be cool.
Yeah, and partially why I'm wondering what the EQ2 interface and the availability of that kind of stuff is because I'm wondering if Daybreak devs have so much experience with people adding on that they can anticipate what people are going to likely want as add-ons and be able to provide that.
True.
Front load it. But
yeah. All right, well, it looks like we're about out of time here tonight. We were going to do the mailbag, but apparently we got way more life out of this topic than I thought we were actually going to, which is...
It's a deep topic.
It is, but I was kind of worried with the fact that they pretty much said we're not doing them, that was going to be the role. But hey, whatever. It all worked out. Before we do our closing, I do have to give a couple shout-outs to a few awesome people that I forgot to do at the beginning of the show, including our new supporters over at patreon.com/Dungeon Crawler Network. That would be Blaine Atkinson, John Bish, Steven Sykes, and Razoo. They have been supporting us this month over at patreon.com/Dungeon Crawler Network, as well as our new Twitch subs, including Adasta224, J21 The Sender, and Bad Lad Jr. There we go. I knew I'd find it. Thank you so much for supporting us over on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Dungeon Crawler Network. All of that helps to go support the network, what we do, and allows us to continue making the content that you enjoy. And hopefully you enjoy it, or else you wouldn't be listening to this show in the first place. All right, guys, end of the show. Final thoughts and where people can find you. Let us start with our guest, Dygz.
Let's see. You can find me on Twitter at Dygz Briarthorn. You should check out the podcasts for Theory Forge at twitch.tv/Theory Forge. And I believe that is also our YouTube, Theory Forge.
I think it is, but you can just search it too. I know it comes up if you type it in. Okay. Oh, that was it. All right, cool. Well, I definitely appreciate you, Dygz, coming on the show. And I definitely enjoy your guys' show over there at Theory Forge. They do a couple other shows as well that I actually, I'm going to tell a little bit of a story here. I remember watching you guys, and I don't know if you still do it because the game kind of went on hiatus. It was for, what was that Cthulhu game? Help me out. Revival, yes. Yeah,
that'd be good.
Yes, I'm so disappointed with the fact that that one went into indefinite hiatus. But that's actually where
it did. But Snipe Hunter is now lead designer for Chronicles of Illyria.
Oh, okay. So
some of that stuff is going up. Some of his stuff is going in over there. So
all right.
We're about to start a show this Friday for Chronicles of Illyria, and he's going to hype for us why we should be interested in playing the game. So come on over Friday and check us out at Theory Forge on YouTube afterwards.
What time is that? I'll let you do a shout out for that.
6. It's Friday, 6 p.m. Pacific time.
Okay, there you go. Check that out. Twitch.tv/Theory Forge. All right, Alpha Soul, where can people find you?
Yeah, I can be found on YouTube, YouTube/Drakdoc, DRACDOC, or I can be found within the Hands of Fate or the Dungeon Crawler Network Discord. You can usually find me idling or talking in there.
Absolutely. Storms, buddy.
All right. So again, Saturday nights, IC ESO. We have a great time in the server. We have a great time in PvP action. You can also find me, Stormlords, at digitalpiperstudios.com. First app went into production, and I'm now busily working on a second app, which has changed from a 2D prep platformer to a match 3 type Facebook Android game that should be coming out probably within a month.
Ooh, nice.
Because I just have not enough time to do no else. But it's fun. Anyways, you can also find me on the Discord with Alpha and Ag, but not quite as much. But I try and hang around.
He's around. He's definitely around. You can follow me on Twitter at Aggelos, AGGELOS_WOF, of course, in our Discord and in the Ashes of Creation Discord. I have the same name. You'll find me. I'm there. But more importantly, you can find everything we do, DungeonCrawlerNetwork.com, where it has the list of all of our podcasts that we do, both for Ashes of Creation, for our ESO show, and some of our other stuff, including Tavern Talk for Saga of Leucemia. And every once in a great blue moon, we actually do an MMO show as well, but it's very blue moonish. I don't know. We all turn into werewolves. It's crazy. Anyway, we also have links to all of our social media, all of our plethora of Twitter accounts, Facebook.com/Dungeon Network, YouTube.com/Dungeon Network, etc., etc. Here our Twitch page. All of that you can find there on that website, and we really appreciate you listening to our shows and for leaving us iTunes reviews, including Paulie B, Jaeger C, and Sterling from Vengeance, all leaving 5-star reviews this week. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for that. That really does help us get exposure as a show, that people know that we are a real podcast, that we say real words, and sometimes it's relevant. Thank you so much. We hope to see you next time here on From the Ashes. See you later.